Hello everyone, and welcome back to Cobb Hill Farms. Hope everyone had a good holiday season and a good start to their 2024 year. I know we have. In today's video, we're going to start working on the Farmall H project, going through some of the rear end parts. We have the axles here. We got to work on getting these bearings off. The outer axle bearings are shot. When I took the cast centers off and I was able to pick up and down on the axle and had a little bit of play in them, so I knew the bearings were bad, but they definitely are. When you spin them over, they sound like a meat grinder. So now after that, we're going to go through the transmission main shaft and counter shaft assembly and see what we need for bearings and things like that. So this shaft I already got cleaned up, and I'm going to swap it out, get the other shaft cleaned up, and we'll knock these bearings off. So now that we got the grooves all cleaned out, use a wire wheel for that, a knotted wire wheel. I'm gonna use a 4.5-inch flap wheel for cleaning up the rest of the shaft. Does a better job at taking the paint off and rust, and it's a little bit quicker. So now that we got the shaft all cleaned off, the main reason I clean the shaft off is any buildup of paint would just make it harder for this bearing to come off of here. The bearing inside diameter is actually a little bit larger than what this shaft is, but I figure I might as well take a few minutes and make my life easier as far as getting this bearing off. There. There's that bearing, and this one's the same treatment. Pretty well shot. Man, you can really hear the roughness in it. Man, you can feel the play. I don't know if you can see that in the camera or not, but quite a bit of play in there. I'm just going to take these shafts and lay them over here for now, out of the way. But I got to clean them up a little better and find a different spot for them until we're ready. But so there's the outer bearings. These are the inner bearings, inner axle bearings that go on this side. These are okay. There was nothing wrong with them. So we're going to reuse those. So we'll put them in the parts washer and clean them up. So over here on the bench, we have our main input section and main gear shaft assembly for the transmission. It bolts in the transmission housing just pretty much how you see it. It's actually made up of two parts. You have your input gear section here, then you have your main shaft with your sliding gears. This is your reverse and first gear, second and third sliding gear, and your fourth and fifth sliding gear. This section over here is where the power comes in from the clutch assembly through the shaft. This gear here is for your belt pulley that sits on top of the transmission housing. This set of gears here is in constant mesh with the counter shaft down below that transmits power back through the bottom and then comes back up through to your sliding gears. And then this set of short stubby gears here engages in the fourth and fifth sliding gear. When you slide it forward and engage it in here, that's fifth gear. It's direct drive through the shaft. Completely omits the counter shaft down below. So what we're going to check first is our bearing assembly here. So we're going to check the bearings here in your input shaft assembly. Now we're going to separate all this. I got a bolt over here that will slide down inside, missing the threads for that holds the hub that goes on for your drive that connects it to the drive shaft. We're just going to take and strike this without dropping anything on the floor, which we managed to do. So now we have in this housing, you have your outer bearing, if I can get it out. We got our outer bearing, checking that for wear and play. Feels good. I don't hear any noise when you spin it over. Feels good and smooth. Checking it for lateral play. I don't feel any lateral play in it. So I think that bearing's in good shape. So we're going to set this off to the side. Get this bolt out of here. We don't need that. So now we'll check the inner bearing. Spin that over. I do feel a little bit of roughness in it. Rocking the outer cage back and forth, I do see quite a, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there is quite a bit of play here in that bearing assembly. So we're going to have to look at that. Probably end up replacing that inner bearing. So checking this, what would be the outer race for the bearing, but it's actually part of this hub. There's no race inside this drive hub assembly. It is actually a little bit rough. You can feel some pitting in there. These gear assemblies are available aftermarket through either Steiner or places like Bates Corporation. So we may look into getting a new shaft, but we'll have to check that a little bit closer. Maybe we can clean that up enough. I don't know. We'll have to see. To check this bearing out, this is the one that is in mesh or recesses in your input shaft housing. This has got some pitting. You know, these, you really can't check these as far as play, mainly because there's no outer race. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace this bearing. It's no good the way it is from judging what I see. So we're gonna do that. Next thing I want to do is try to get this bearing assembly off of here. So that'll be next. So now we're going to get this outer bearing assembly off. This input shaft bearing assembly, I should say. Try to drive this off without marring up the shaft at all. There, that bearing come off nice and easy. So we got the bearing with the bolt. We'll set that over here. We know where that goes. Now we're going to make some room here. We're going to slide these gears off, and you got to make sure these gears will go back on the shaft in the right order. So we're going to slide the 4th and 5th gear off. Just lay that upside down. The 2nd and 3rd gear, slide that off, lay that upside down. Now we'll take the reverse and 1st gear. See if I can hold it, and there we go. She was just stuck a little bit. So now, before I forget which way it went, we're going to take it off and lay it that way. This here is your inner bearing for supporting the rear shaft, rear main shaft. This is a retaining collar, so we're going to lay that here too. So down here on the shaft, we've got this retaining ring. I got to get that off of there. I'm just going to get in behind it with a pick and work that up. There, we got that up. So now we'll grab a hold of this and hopefully we can slide it right up the shaft. There, sliding that right up and get that off. Now we're able to pull that bearing right up off the shaft. We'll set that out of the way. Now I can check this bearing a little bit closer. I can rotate it. Actually, this bearing feels pretty good. A little bit of play in it, but not terrible. It felt a lot worse, that's for sure. I think for the amount we're going to use this tractor, I think this bearing will be pretty good. So I'm pleased with the findings of this. Now we're going to go through the countershaft assembly. The countershaft assembly is mounted in a transmission case like this being the front underneath the main shaft assembly. So what happens is the power comes in from the main shaft and engages, the main shaft engages on this gear, and then in turn your sliding gears mesh with different gears, giving you different gear ratios that helps either speed up or slow down the tractor. The main thing I'm checking here is teeth condition and bearing condition. So this is the input side of the counter shaft. This is the bearing, the front bearing that supports the front of the shaft. The bearing itself checks out okay. There's no play in it. What we have here is the bearing retainer housing. The bearing sits in here. This ring around the race is offset and sets in the groove just like that, so it locates it properly. Inside here is a set of seals. Looks like there's a lip seal here, and then there's another seal on the outside, so it's double sealed. You have your drive coupler that screws onto here. That is for your belt, excuse me, not your belt pulley, but your belly pump. That drives, there's a coupler that goes up in there and engages in the belly pump of the tractor, so you have hydraulics when the clutch is up. So this all checks out okay. This bearing here is your rear counter shaft bearing. This bearing feels okay as well. I don't feel or see anything wrong with that. And that one I don't believe really has a direction. This locking collar, the bearing goes on, and then the locking collar goes on behind it. And that goes on here. This set of splines here is for your PTO. I can explain that more in a future video when it's going back together and show you how the PTO works on that. So what I want to look at here, the biggest concern with this is looking at the condition of the teeth. So if we look at the teeth, I look for anything that's chipped or broken, a broken tooth completely. A lot of times if you have a broken tooth, you'll hear a growl coming from the transmission, but I don't see anything. Everything looks okay. So from what I'm seeing here, the only thing I found bearing wise that looks like it needs to be replaced is on the input shaft and the main shaft support bearing. So most everything else in the transmission, as far as the main gear set, looks good. So now here on the bench, I have the differential assembly that encompasses your ring gear. And this is your ring gear carrier or your carrier assembly. And we're going to take this unit apart just to make sure there's nothing the matter inside. There, now that we got the top half of this carrier assembly off. So what we have here is you have your cross that has your spider gears on it. Then on either side of that, you have your side gears. Your side gears are what are splined into your axle shafts. And what happens is as this whole unit rotates in a straight line, the spider gears lock both side gears together and keep them from rotating. Now when you go to make a turn, the spider gears actually allow your side gears to rotate at different speeds, allowing your outside wheel that's making the turn to spin faster than the inside wheel. So this is very critical to check and make sure you don't have any play and wear on anything. I'm going to pop this out of here and see what it looks like. A little bit of play side to side, but I'm really not too worried about it, I guess. I think this will be all right. So everything seems to be okay here. Well, now that we went through the transmission and differential assemblies, now we know what to order as far as bearings. Also get some gaskets and stuff coming. In the meantime, we're going to go through the castings and start cleaning those up and getting those ready for paint. So that way, once we get parts, we can start putting the tractor back together and make it look like something. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you like our channel, please subscribe. And with that, we'll see you next time.